thing that first got me hooked in doing ceramics was actual throwing on the wheel. And I'd never really seen it done until I was about 17. And Fred Shepard came into this ceramics course that I took as an elective and began to throw on the wheel, and I was mesmerized. Immediately I wanted to do it. And then as I began to learn to do it, it was like addictive. The clay, it comes alive. It's like the clay takes on a life of its own. And it's therapeutic. There's any number of ways to describe it. Each person has their own description, but nearly everybody I know that does pottery or works in clay, it's a visceral, gut level thing that when you begin to touch it and make it do what it is you want it to do, every time I'm throwing on the wheel and I'm doing multiples of anything, or if I'm doing a one of a kind, it's the same. I don't get tired of it. It's therapeutic. It's almost like meditating. You get into this groove, into this sort of get locked in, and your time stands still. There's no other way to describe it. So that's what got me hooked at first, was actually touching and moving. And to be honest, in the beginning, Fred didn't allow us to keep anything. So we didn't have any end result in sight. We just threw pots on the wheel with the idea that these pots are going to be, this clay is going to be recycled and be made into other pots later on. But we never had an end result in mind. We were only interested in the actual process, the actual doing, without anything else to justify it other than just the sheer pleasure of doing it. Of object that draws me the most, that I am compelled to do, starts out as something that is functional, whether it's going to end up being functional or not. I've painted, I've done pastel, oil, etc. And one of the things that finally one of the elements that made me finally decide to work in clay was the archival quality. There have been things made by human hands in clay that are 40,000 years old. I doubt any painting is going to last that long, or drawing, etc. So that was attractive to me right at the outset. And also the fact that just simply drinking from a ceramic mug connects you to nearly every human being back to the Neolithic. Nearly everyone at one time or another has drunk from a ceramic mug. So those two elements together convinces me that if I make mugs, if I make nothing but mugs, even if there's another artist making some of the finest artwork in the world, over time, that simple mug is going to outlast everything. So therefore, you better be very conscientious in how you make that mug. It's like making a chair. It's a continuing pursuit to make the perfect mug. How it rests in the hand. You can take a mug made by a potter, and nearly everything that potter knows is in that mug, is based in that mug in terms of how the handle was made, the lip, the base, the glaze, how thick it is or how thin it is. If it's thicker, it's more durable and it will insulate better. If it's thinner, it's more aesthetically pleasing because light will pass through porcelain, thin porcelain. And so it's just aesthetically pleasing to hold a very light mug and drink from it that light is passing through like a stained glass window. So, but at the same time, to make a mug that is functional is a whole different aesthetic in itself. So my view is if nothing else in my entire career as a potter, if I can make the perfect mug, then I've accomplished something. Sometimes you'll get a pot out of a firing that is just so extraordinary that that's the pot that you pack away into your attic for your great-grandchildren. You save. Every firing that I do, if there's one or two pots in it that are above and beyond what it was I was shooting for, those are for me and my grandchildren or great-grandchildren that I put aside. After a firing, after having waited 2 days for it to cool down, 2 to 3 days, and you crack it just a little bit to let it begin to cool off a little more. You wait until it's around 200 degrees and you crack it just so it'll begin to kind of cool down more. You take a flashlight and shine in there and look, and you'll see a little red thing or a little blue thing, and you'll think, oh man. Or you'll see something ugly and you'll think, oh, this is a disaster. And then you open it up, and the only ugly pot that's in there is the one you saw with the flashlight. And then you begin to unload the kiln, working from the front to the back. And if it's a good firing, you just get more and more excited each piece that you take out, and you're wanting to get it unloaded, and yet each piece you take out, you stop and you're examining that piece, and you just can't wait to get to the next one, but you want to enjoy this piece first. And you set it down on the table and turn it and check it for boogers, because there's sometimes little clay bits that we call boogers that stick out that have to be filed off, etc. But as you work your way towards the back, the excitement just grows and grows and grows. And then you set it all out on the table and listen to it tink. There's these little sounds that they give off as they cool down over days, several days, and sometimes weeks. Every now and then you'll have a pot sitting on your table and you'll hear this little clink, and it's the glaze moving in the clay over the clay body. And it's not, doesn't hurt anything. It's not something that's creating a flaw in the pot or anything. But even after you've unloaded it and you've got all these pots laid out on the table from the loading, it takes 2 or 3 days to absorb it all, just to actually look at it. In a pot that you initially unloaded that you didn't even give a second thought to, you come back and look at it, and there's subtleties in it that you didn't notice at first. In other words, you have to live with it for a while to appreciate it. And one of the hardest things that potters have to deal with, and I know this from talking to all of them, we have this in common, is if you put a pot in the kiln with an idea of how it's supposed to look from the moment that you've been throwing it on the wheel until you put it in the kiln to fire, and then as you unload the kiln, that pot does not meet the expectations that you had when you first put it in there, you think failure. Then you sit it on a table and leave it and don't even think about it because you thought failure. And 2 or 3 days later, you come back and look at it and go, where'd that pot come from? That's beautiful. Or somebody will come in your studio and look at it and go, oh my God, I gotta have that, that's beautiful. And you've got to overcome your expectations and take what comes out of the kiln and appreciate it for what it is right at the moment without any expectations. And so that's why it's good to leave it on the table and just let it sit and not think about it for a while, because sometimes your expectations can get in the way and you might have something better than what you expect. Everything that an artist does is based on their experience and who they are. So all the experiences I've gathered up to this point informs what I'm doing in regard to clay as an art form, and whether it be doing functional things or one-of-a-kind pieces. So yeah, I decided early on that I was not going to be able to make it early on make a living doing pottery. So I went into teaching, and after 34 years of teaching, and a lot of it was teaching ceramics, now I am full-time potter, ceramicist, and my goal now is to get to the point where I never have to go further than walking distance from the studio for the rest of my life.